On this episode of Clear the Air,
This corruption goes back decades. It's nothing new. There's a long history of people who work in the FDA who approve pharmaceutical products, and then miraculously, a couple months later, they're actually working for the company whose drug they approve.
I don't have experience with narcotics, but I can tell you that specifically opioids, right? They will attach to the opioid center in the brain, and it's a reward center. And so not only is it blocking the pain, but it's also that addictive property is giving you that reward.
A lot of people actually think that he is an anti-vaxxer, but if you listen to really what he says, that's far from the truth. What he actually wants is he wants the vaccine companies, the companies that make the vaccines, to actually be liable for their products so that they will go through and do the safety studies that are supposed to be done. Those companies are not doing the studies showing that these vaccines are really safe and effective. Welcome to the Clear the Air podcast. I'm your host, Nate Jones, and here is Joel Melton.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back.
Today is Friday, and it's been 1 week since RFK made his announcement that he was suspending his campaign and joining Trump, and vowed in his speech to make America healthy again. I thought it was a great speech, whether you agree with him or not. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I do agree with RFK, and I've chatted with him about it a long time ago, a couple of years ago, about the need to do what we can with our public health to turn around where we're at and to make America healthy again. And as I watched it live, he kept coming up and talking about vaccines being an issue, seed oils being an issue, sugar being an issue, and that's part of what I think the issue is. But I think there's a large part of corruption inside of our government health agencies and the agencies that regulate those industries. And what I mean by that is, if you look at what the NIH and the USDA came out with last year. They came out and said that Lucky Charms are actually better for you than a steak. And you would have to be a complete idiot to actually think that. There's just no way that's even possible. And hopefully they when they put this up, they edited one of the pictures, that graph into it, just to show you how ridiculous that is. And so that needs to be addressed. And we've addressed it. We've talked about this in past episodes, that the FTC is actually suing me and Clear. Clear is a company. We sell hygiene products. We believe that, good hygiene, cleanliness is next to godliness. If anybody knows who originally said that, I had to look it up a little while ago.
I don't know who said it.
It was, dang it, now I can't remember his name. It was the guy that started Calvinism.
Oh.
Mathers. Marshall No, that's Eminem.
Slim Shady did it?
No, it was the guy that started the Calvinist movement.
Oh.
But anyways, he said cleanliness is next to godliness, but that's really what we're talking about is how to keep your gateway microbiomes clean, your mouth, your nose, and do that. And so the question is when Robert Kennedy and Trump get in the White House, and then when they win the election, which I'm expecting that they do, what are they going to do? Really, what are they going to do to make America healthy again? Because I'm really interested to see what they're going to do. If they're going to focus on simply, vaccine transparency, which is a big thing that Robert talks about, which a lot of people, if you really listen to what he says, a lot of people actually think that he is an anti-vaxxer. But if you listen to really what he says, that's far from the truth. What he actually wants is he wants the vaccine companies, the companies that make the vaccines, to actually be liable for their products so that they will go through and do the safety studies that are supposed to be done, because what he has shown in all of his lawsuits with the NIH, with the FDA, those companies are not doing the studies showing that these vaccines are really safe and effective.
So ethical distribution, manufacturing, all of that is what he really wants, yeah.
And I want to see how he's going to do that. But I think in the long run, I think that's actually a small part in it. He also talked about the need to get seed oils out of our diet, GMO. I mean, I'm not really familiar on that. I try to eat organic food. I tried to, but I'm not adamant about it. I have
Sure.
some friends who won't even travel because they're afraid they're going to eat something that's not organic, or there might be some seed oils in it. And I'm like, well, okay, I try to be healthy, but
Yeah.
I'm not going
pretty
to
extreme.
put a damper on I'm not going to crimp my lifestyle,
Right.
because of that. So, anyways, so I think one of the big things that he needs to do, or they need to do, this incoming administration, I think either whoever wins, whether it's Kamala or Trump, they should address the corruption that's inside of our government agencies. I mean, this corruption goes back decades. It's nothing new. There's a long history of people who work in the FDA who approve pharmaceutical products, and then miraculously, a couple months later, they're actually working for the company whose drug they approved. I mean, they have a long record of approving drugs that are then needing to be pulled off the market because they're ineffective, because they're harmful. I mean, you have Vioxx, where the company Merck, Merck, they actually made a decision to push ahead with it, even though they knew and they had the data that it was going to kill people, which is crazy.
Complete collapse of that system then.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think our regulatory agencies are. A lot of people say they're captured. I don't think they're captured. I think they're just corrupt.
Yeah.
I think you have people in the government agencies who will go and approve something because they're going to get a job later on.
Yeah.
I mean, even look at the COVID vaccine project.
Right.
A lot of the people who worked on the panels approving those now work for Moderna and Pfizer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
incredible.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
And as you sit here and go through this, and I've actually done a lot of reading on this, and we're going to talk about this. It's going to be a 3-part series on government corruption in the regulatory agencies, and we're going to use as an example the COVID epidemic. Not the COVID epidemic, I'm sorry. The opioid. They all end in a D. But the opioid epidemic, because that one it's still ongoing because, it's still having issues. But it's one that there's enough data out there now that we can see what happens when the regulatory system collapses and when it is not doing its job right. People die. Millions of people are their lives are ruined. And I'm saying this from a position that my older brother died earlier this year from an overdose. And it was something that the doctors prescribed to him 30 years ago, and he got hooked, and they just didn't have the systems in place. And we paid for him to go into rehab a couple of times. He was in and out of jail. I mean, but again, that's a very sad part, but that is...
Yeah, so they synthetically designed something that is so attractive to the makeup of the brain that you can't do anything about it. I mean, that's true addiction, and they can't do it. It's just sad to watch that, especially when it results in death.
Yeah. So I wanted to get started on this 3-part series, and this was really an interesting part because I started reading up on the opioid, and I'm going to keep mixing up opioid and COVID. So if I mix it up, fix it for me,
Yeah.
please. But I actually started reading and watching in I think it was in 2019 or maybe 2020 that this TV show came out with Michael Keaton, Dope Sick, and it was on Hulu. And I actually got Hulu just to watch that series. And it was well worth the money. I thought it was a phenomenal show. I think Michael Keaton did a great job. But I was watching that in 2020 while I was exercising on the treadmill. And I was also at the same time, not while I was on the treadmill and watching Dope Sick, but I was reading a book by Gerald Posner called Pharma, which is actually a book. It's about that thick. And it's this documentation of how the Sackler family built up this empire, this business empire of marketing and PR and stuff like that in the medical industry. And then they bought this little tiny company called Purdue Pharma. Then they got the drugs in there and it's really started pushing them and hammering it through the FDA and getting Dr. Curtis Wright at the FDA to approve it without any safety data and without any of this, just by offering him a job.
So does the book detail everything you're saying? It has all of the...
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out, so I've watched the Hulu one, which was Dope Sick on it. I watched Painkiller, which was one that has Ferris Bueller, Matthew Broderick. Just got to do that.
Oh yeah.
But it has Matthew Broderick in it, and sorry Matthew, but I think Michael Keaton did a better job. No, I don't know. Matthew Broderick really had to play an evil person, and I don't think Matthew Broderick is that evil.
Yes. Yeah.
Michael Keaton was just playing a doctor.
Yeah.
But so to go back to that in 2020, the tail end of 2020 when this was happening, I'm reading this book about the opioid epidemic and how it happened and what facilitated it. I'm watching Dopesick on Hulu, and during the day, I'm watching all this news about how Pfizer is coming out with this new vaccine and how it's been proven to be safe and effective. And the language that they used was absolutely astonishingly similar to that Pfizer was using to promote their new COVID vaccine, was almost verbatim the same stuff and the same practice that they did in Dopesick that the Purdue Pharma company used to push the opioids.
Huh. So that's eerie.
It's not eerie. It's sketchy.
Yeah.
But the interesting part of that is, and again, it's been a while since I've read it. I should have read it right before I came here. But in the book, the Sackler family, where they really started their business was they were in medical advertising, medical PR.
Right.
And, one of their biggest clients throughout the, I don't know if they still are, but during the time that they were doing all this, one of their biggest clients was Pfizer, which is interesting.
Yep.
So you have, one company that does it, and Pfizer's one of their clients, and they're teaching them how to do it. And then 20 years later, they don't even change it. It's like, oh, yeah, you're taking some opiates, and you're taking some Oxy, or is it OxyContin? Is that the name of their plan?
Yes.
You're taking some OxyContin. Well, it doesn't work. Well, then just double up. Take some more. Yeah, pop 3 more. It's not addictive. And I'm watching in 2001 and early 2021, people that have already been vaccinated, they're still getting sick. And what did Pfizer come and say?
Take more. Booster.
Take more.
Booster.
Get a booster.
Yeah.
Get another booster. Have some more.
Yeah.
And it's just the language and the practices between that were just so similar that it's crazy. And this is where it comes back to what I think that RFK and Trump or Kamala and whoever, they have their hands full, because if they're going to rein in the corruption and clean the corruption out of these regulatory agencies, which they're going to have to do if they want to make America healthy again, it's not going to be an easy task.
Yeah, that's the scary thing, is because there's no one watching over, as we think there should be with FDA, whatever the agency is. No one watching over that, because it's seemingly they continue on or they leave to go to private industry with the whole incestuous circle that they're telling them what to do, then they go become what the regulatories they set up.
Yeah. And that's, even in our case, I think it's not as blatant of a revolving door, but even the FTC attorney that was drafted this ridiculous case and even drafted the new guidelines and regulations now works for a law firm that represents the natural products industry, which is absolutely just stupid. I can't even join an organization that represents the natural products industry, because the lawyer that they're employing is the one that actually drafted the rules that he now comes over and says, well, I'll come over and teach you how to comply. Right. Not how to fight back, not how to push back, right, but I'll come over and work with you on teaching you how to comply. And I don't want to go into that area. We've done that before, but that's just, it's beyond stupid for people to think that way. Well, okay, we'll just do whatever they say, because government agencies, if once you get their, what's the story, the camel in the tent? You get the head in the tent, and pretty soon they're doing everything. So, anyways.
Yeah, that's crazy to think that they can do that, but to the general public, we're looking to them to give us guidelines, give us something. So they're just turning a blind eye. But those who catch wind of it, there's really nothing you can do. When they set up those regulations, then they go manage them from a private sector. It's absolutely ridiculous, because now he's going to go everywhere and try to do that, try to make his place in there. Absolutely ridiculous. Tell me a little bit more about the Sackler family with you. I didn't get a chance to watch the movie yet, but I'm very interested and will probably go watch it. At least one, and you said Dope Sick. But I think that's interesting as I look more into it. But tell me what strategies that they did use as they went through that. You talked about them being a marketing agency before. What else do you know about how they got that in? And
if I remember right, this tells you how I don't want to say corrupt the medical literature industry is, but what the Sackler family would do, and I don't know that they could. Actually, I know that they could probably do it just as easily today. But what they would do is they would go out and make up data points and publish them in journals, or they would try to get them published in journals. And if they couldn't find a journal that would publish it, if the editor looked at it and said this is bogus, well, then they would just go create a journal. And that's what their marketing company did. And I should go get back and again thumb through the book, because the book actually chronicles all these different publishing companies that were owned by subsidiaries of the Sackler family. Because if they had a product, a good thing that a good product that I know they had their fingers in the pie of how it was promoted was Valium. When they first came out with Valium, they were telling everybody how great it was awesome, how it was amazing, there were no downsides. This wasn't because the literature or the studies were published. It was because they made up data points and they published them in journals that they made up.
Yeah, I think that's the disturbing part. I understand that they eventually claimed bankruptcy, like in 2019.
Purdue did, but the Sackler family, they've got billions. And billions. Which
does mirror what happened with the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, right? Billions and billions of dollars were received. It was a company, but...
And those companies are claiming poverty now because I don't know where all the money went, but they're claiming poverty. And, the government just gave Moderna, I think it was $156 million to go develop another mRNA shot for something else. But the question is if they're so flush with cash because, they finally made a product that somebody bought, the government bought. Nobody else would buy it, but the government bought it. What did they do with all the cash and the billions that they just made? Why do they need $156 million to go start to go research another product?
Right. Yeah, that's continually crazy, every aspect that you look at it. So the mirror of the crisis, the opioid crisis, and now the COVID vaccine issue, there's a lot of parallels to that, right, as you see that going down there. What do you think, what's the route that we take? Well, how do we do this? I hear all the time, anecdotally, people are not going to take any more shots. They're not going to get jabbed again, right? So whether it's healthcare professionals or whoever, because the secret's out. It's not working. It's not preventing as they once were told, and people are still getting sick. But where do we mirror between the opioid crisis and how they did that and the COVID vaccine?
I don't know how they're going to do it because our government gave the vaccine manufacturers immunity. The opioids, the Sacklers and the Purdue, they didn't have that immunity. I do believe that, I didn't get vaccinated, so I don't have a standing to do anything. But I do think that there was fraud, and I think there's some of the state attorney generals are starting to go after Pfizer for fraud in the inducement. But that's outside of what I'm well acquainted with. That isn't anything that I'm really following closely. But I do think that there are some attorney generals of the states that are saying, they lied to us when the contract was signed. They were saying that it was effective. They were saying they were making claims for it.
So
and
that's
that would
interesting.
Be fraud.
I guess because they have immunity because they did the emergency rush through and got all that, and they couldn't be held for it. But they did make claims, and now they can hold them to those claims, or at least they're trying. I did see that as well. There's probably, I don't know, even up to a dozen state attorney generals that are joining in on that somewhere there.
We should do a podcast. We should get a lot more data on that and then do a podcast on those down the road.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see all of those.
Yeah, but so going back, we have a list of questions here that we want to ask each other. You can ask me the first question because I want to ask you the second one because I don't know the answer to the second one. I'm hoping you do.
So the first one is, how did the opioid crisis start?
And that's an easy one because I've read a lot about it. And it started because Curtis Wright, a doctor that worked for the FDA, approved OxyContin for use in patients that were not terminal and for periods of longer than 3 days. Prior to that, they'd only been able to use them on people who were in like hospice or end of life cancer treatment, or for up to, I think it was 3 days, so that you're not getting the addiction issue. And when if I'm recalling this correctly, and I may not be correct, but if I recall correctly, what Purdue was claiming was that they were putting a timed release something into their pills, and so instead of having a big spike, which is where the addiction happens, it goes into just a constant thing. And it was very, very soon after those were put on the market, they knew that wasn't true because the addicts were going in and sucking off the time release stuff and then just grinding them up and eating them.
Wow.
So it wasn't a time release. It was just they put on a colored coating of some sort, and people would just suck that off, and then they'd go to town.
Just an easy hack.
Yeah. So it wasn't really. But that's really where it started. And then the other part of how it started is the Sackler family really started promoting, non-addictive, pain. They started putting out a scale of 1 to 10. They started mocking doctors, saying if you're not managing the pain, then you're not managing your patients right. If you're not managing your patient's pain, anytime a patient comes in, you have to ask them a question of, 1 to 10, how much pain are you in? And, someone comes in, well, okay, if you're up here, you should take 1 OxyContin. And they had a huge marketing campaign. And if you go and you watch, if you watch Painkiller, that actually has a lot better information on how the salespeople for Purdue push the drugs a lot.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. So really, we're sending doctors to all this education. They're getting all this experience. And then we let a bureaucrat or someone else tell them exactly how to run their practice or deal with their patients, even though they've got all this experience. So it's absolutely incredible to think that continues to go on from the opioid crisis to today.
And it does. So tell me, what are narcotics, and how do they affect the brain and the body?
That's a good question. I don't have experience with narcotics, but I can tell you that specifically opioids, right, they will attach to the opioid center in the brain, and it's a reward center. And so not only is it blocking the pain, but it's also that addictive property is giving you that reward. And so as you just mentioned, with them taking off that first layer of time release, it just levels out, but it doesn't, because in their mind, so they have to keep on getting more and more, because that reward center, just like anything, any desire that you have, you want more and more of eventually later, because you satiate or you get to that level where it's fine. And so that's what happens with the opioid crisis. They just want more and more because they're feeling that block of pain, and then they also have that reward center that needs more, continually wants more. And so that's really the crazy thing about those, especially opioids in that circumstance. And that's why there's a crisis. And so opioids that are manufactured in a facility that are synthetic, they can pinpoint it down, but that's why there's a fentanyl crisis right now, because it's doing the exact same thing that OxyContin was doing, and hydrocodone and codone and all of those. They're acting the same.
So here's a question that I think is important. What was Purdue Pharma's role in the crisis? Well, I mean, that's kind of an easy question.
Yeah,
I'll give you the lowball question.
Well, I think it's easy because they started it, right? They did all of the research, all of the study on how to get the consumer or the user, and how to get companies. Everything about it they knew, and then they moved right into the manufacturing and selling of it. So it was a perfect match and a perfect storm for them, so to speak. And then they could do that. What are your thoughts? How do you think? How did they?
Well, no, that's exactly. I think they created the crisis. I don't think it isn't. I don't think they had a role. I think they created it. They put the drug out there, they push the FDA, they bribe the FDA agent. I mean, the people at the FDA.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm making a bold statement there, but when the person that approves your pharmaceutical product is working for you within, the next couple of years, I'm going to say it looks a little shady.
A little suspicious. Yes.
And when you're giving them a payroll of, $500,000 a year, $400,000 to $500,000 a year in the 90s, it looks a lot more shady.
Yes.
But that you see that now. I mean, you see so much of that now. I mean, you have Scott Gottlieb who worked for the FDA and, then he left and now he's on Pfizer's board. You have all these other people who left the FDA and now they're on the boards of these companies. And, I think that's something else that just needs to stop.
Yeah. It seems like that continually goes, and almost to the point when we have these crises, they ought to just look straight to see those circumstances, because I think you're going to find it everywhere. Once they uncover what's there and get beyond that, you're going to see behind the scenes the shadiness.
Yeah.
It seems like every crisis is like that. Even COVID and the vaccine, you're going to find that everywhere with that.
And one of the other things that I think is that it took a long time because, during and comparing this to COVID again, the opioid crisis to COVID, the media, they're still not saying anything bad about the vaccine.
Sure.
You have to go look outside of the mainstream media, the legacy media, to find anything bad happening with these vaccines. We know it's happening because it's all over the place.
Yeah.
But your MSNBC, your NBC, your Fox, your CBS, your legacy media channels, they're not talking about it. And even when even when the opioid crisis happened, it was going on for years before the media really started talking about it. Because OxyContin, Purdue, was paying hundreds of millions of dollars in ads and running them on all the TV stations saying, "Hey, what's your pain smiling like? Go talk to your pain doctor."
Yeah, so right now, between 1999 and 2021, I read that we are 6 times more deaths because of the opioid crisis. 6 times more in that short a time. And so it equals out to 2021, the last numbers I saw, 220 people a day are dying from the opioid crisis. That's a day. And that's incredible to think that there's not a greater outrage in the government to stop, to do whatever. But 220, if that number's even close to right, that's incredible to think that many people are dying a day just because of this initiation of something back in 1999 that went out of control.
Dang. That's crazy.
Yeah. I can't believe it. So where did this all start? The Sackler family, did they target an area geographically that they would have started this where it was easy, low-hanging fruit?
I think if I remember right from Dope Sick, they actually started in the Appalachia area, the mining towns and places like that, and they would just go in and give out samples to the doctors. In the movie Dope Sick, and they say that it, based on true events, but it was actually Michael Keaton, the doctor, the main actor in that, he actually got hooked on the pills himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, what they did is they went in and marketed it and focused on one area, and it was in Kentucky, West Virginia, in that area, and that's where they first got going. I was living in Louisiana, working on the oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico in the 90s when all of this was starting to happen, and you would see these pain clinics all over down in Louisiana, and it was just like, hey, come in and get your pain taken care of. You should never be in pain. I mean, and you saw these ads all over the place, and you'd be working with people out on these oil rigs that were on these opioids.
Really? Because it was prescription, they could get away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like they targeted those who were most vulnerable in the fact that they didn't have a lot of options. If they had hurt their leg or hurt their back doing manual labor or whatever they were doing, blue-collar work, they didn't have another option. They had to get over the pain because they could not work.
They had to get back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And, one of the things, that I think really helped this was I'm trying to think of how to say it, but somehow what I think our government needs to do, and they're not going to do it, but I think they should, is they have to somehow get these people in the regulatory agencies to be liable for the decisions that they make. You know, Dr. Curtis Wright killed millions of people, millions, ruined families all over the world because of what he did for a couple $100,000.
Right.
Okay. You know, you have regulatory agencies. I mean, I'll bring back our case. Okay. You can make a solid argument that Serena Viswanathan and Richard Cleland and these people at the FTC that censored Clear and Navage and NeilMed, our competitors, in early 2020 or late 2020, when we had data showing that, you know, if you just use saline, not a nasal spray with xylitol, but just saline, you know, you were 8 times less likely, not 8%, 8x, 8 times less likely to be hospitalized or die from COVID. And when, you know, we tried sharing that data, the FTC sent us warning letters. They sent NeilMed, they sent Navage these warning letters saying, stop, cease and desist. You can't talk about this. But those people, they have to acknowledge at some point that they're responsible because, you know, you still had hundreds of thousands of people that died in the next year or two, and people are still dying today from COVID because nobody will go out there and talk about nasal hygiene because the government is censoring that.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that's the case, especially when they're egregious and they've gone through and done something that they know about. Everyone makes mistakes, and we can't just excuse that when it's someone's health. But when they're making those calculated mistakes that they're doing, and it's not even mistakes, but when they're making those choices, they're doing those things. And in the end, you can follow a money trail. It's completely unbelievable that they can't follow that and track that back up, but they're all immune to it, and they just move on to private sector, where if I were to do something the slightest bit, I'd have people knocking down my door.
Yeah.
But because they're correlated with the government, it's completely different.
I somehow they need to make sure, because, you know, I kept referring and I keep referring to corruption in the government agencies. I don't believe that government agencies or government is corrupt. Okay, I don't believe that Purdue Pharma as an organization was corrupt. The people in Purdue were bad actors and corrupt. The people in the FDA that are approving these drugs that they know are going to kill people, those are bad actors. Okay, the people at the FTC that are censoring science, that are censoring, you know, actionable data that people can use, those are bad actors. That's the corruption that needs to be rooted out. The agencies themselves, I mean, the FTC, if you read through what they're supposed to be doing, they're supposed to be doing this, and their mandate from Congress is making sure that people aren't out there making false and misleading statements. And, you know, if the difference between making false and misleading statements and saying, okay, now you have to, in order for it to be true, you have to have 2 RCT studies showing that, random controls trials showing that it's true. But even if you have 2 RCT studies, that still doesn't mean it's true, because there's lots of things out there that you have, you know, fake data. I mean, opioids had RCT studies showing that they weren't addictive.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing.
But the question is who else should be charged for crimes in the opioid scenario, or who else should be charged in the COVID scenario? I think there's a lot of crimes of commission and crimes of omission. And I do think that Curtis Wright, I mean, I don't know how old he is, but, you know, I do believe that he should be criminally charged. I do believe that Richard Cleland and some of these other people at the FTC who filed lawsuits, sent warning letters silencing this without ever reading the studies themselves. They didn't read them. They acknowledged that they didn't read them. But I think that those people should be charged.
Yeah, it all sounds like complete negligence, which I think is very... chargeable. You can certainly...
It's negligent homicide.
Yeah. I agree.
So, anyways, we'll pick this back up in another episode. We're doing 3 episodes of this Clear the Air podcast with the opioid crisis and how they clean up the government so that we don't have another one, because I do believe that if the government agents, the regulatory agencies aren't fixed, then we're going to continue to have epidemic after epidemic and pandemic after pandemic, and I don't think it's going to stop until, you change the system that's regulating that. Because the opioid epidemic was 100% man-made. The COVID pandemic was 100% man-made. Granted, it could have come out of a lab, it could have come from wherever, but the response of our public health officials and our regulatory agencies is really what made it a pandemic. It was a flash in the pan if there had been one decision made correctly. And so anyway, but that's another episode, and we'll get started on the next episode and get that for you.
We'll catch you on the next one.
This episode was hosted by Nathan Jones, co-hosted by Joel Melton, produced by David Monk. Associate producer, Matthew Davis. Video and audio were edited by Caleb Scoresby. Research by Sabre Bills. Graphics by Joseph Thornton. Music by Augusto Diniz. If you enjoyed this episode of Clear the Air, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest episode. Have a favorite episode? Share it with a friend or on social media. New episodes of Clear the Air are published weekly on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
But what's the difference between hydrocodone and codone?
There's oxycodone and hydrocodone.
What's hydrocodone?
It's a different format.
Maybe I'm being ignorant here, but I thought it was all oxycodone.
No, there's hydrocodone too. I don't know the science.
So we're a
of it.
bunch of ignorant people talking about a topic we know nothing about. You can cut that out. Okay. Anyways.